program is a senior political scientist and former member of the Cameroon government, Professor Elvis Ngolengole. Prof, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on your very prestigious program.
All right. As a political analyst, what's your take on the political climate in Cameroon today, characterized by growing unrest and instability?
Well, my take on the political climate is that as a nation, we have had the misfortune of being faced with sort of tension in our two English-speaking regions of the Northwest and the Southwest. Tensions, I say unfortunate because I know and I've grown up to believe that Cameroonians in the Northwest and the Southwest regions who are English-speaking by virtue of history and culture are bona fide citizens of integrity. And they have always felt and have always manifested their patriotism and their pride of being Cameroonian. But nonetheless, they have at the same time harbored some frustrations or misgivings, and from time to time they have had some reason to make their feelings known. It has just so happened that in the last year or so we were faced with two syndicates from the two English-speaking regions of Northwest and Southwest, the common law lawyers and the teachers. They expressed their feelings, and legitimately so, that they wanted their conditions to be better, to be improved. And I think legitimately and legally it was normal that they do so. And I was glad to see that the government's reaction was to dialogue with them and try to find a way to solve their problems. And from the measures that were taken, it's obvious and everyone can see, unless someone wants to be of good faith, the government tried to respond as much as they could, even much more than they probably expected.
Now, some critics have attributed the country's unstable socio-political atmosphere to the fact that President Paul Biya has stayed in power for too long, close to 4 decades, and some equally highlight government's inability to handle some major issues like the social unrest in the Northwest and Southwest regions of the country, and even development issues.
Well, those are 2 or 3 issues put in one, which is not really what, as we have lived in the last 1 year, this is really not what it is. The issue that we have lived with in the last 1 year, and I imagine for the last 2 or 3 decades, has really not been an issue of how long or whether or not the President Biya should be or should have been in power, because we know that as a democracy and as honest citizens who are enjoying what democracy offers in a republic such as ours, the issue of whether or not a president who is elected legally, constitutionally, legitimately by the people should be there or continue to be there is not necessarily linked with when lawyers or teachers go on strike. That's a different story. But nevertheless, that issue of whether or not or for how long a leader who is elected has to be in power is always decided in all democracies through a legitimate and legal election. And in a democracy such as ours, we have these elections, we've had them since democracy returned to Cameroon in the 1990s. We will have them this year. So if that is the issue, We didn't need to have the strikes of lawyers and teachers. If that is the issue, all we have to do is we all wait for the month of October, when we expect the next presidential election to take place, and that issue, the people of Cameroon democratically will find an answer to that issue because they will vote. But if the issue is what we have lived with in the last 1 year, which is that, and I should say, if the issue is the President of the Republic being in power or not being in power, then it is not an issue of only Anglophones of the Northwest and Southwest. It's an issue of all Cameroonians. So it is not, it will look funny to see that it's only the Anglophones in the Northwest and Southwest who are concerned with that issue. Now, as to the issue that you raised, the frustrations that some Anglophones have expressed, I think it's normal that these frustrations are expressed by whoever. In this case, we have the Anglophones of the Northwest and Southwest. And I think from all that I see, first, the President has said he has understood them and is willing to go to any length to find a solution, and is willing to go through the method of dialoguing.
All right, Prof, we'll be coming back to dialogue in a short while. But you see, what many political actors, notably those of the opposition and critics of the civil society, consider what is happening in this in Cameroon today, the unrest, the instability, notably in the Northwest and Southwest region, as crystal clear illustration of the failure of the Biya regime. Now, I want us to listen to this extract of the national president of the Cameroon People's Party, the CPP, Kabangwala Edith. She says that the Biya regime has not only failed, but has failed woefully and should step down. And I know that you're a member of the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, CPDM. Yes, you're a former member of government, former Minister of Forestry and Wildlife. But as an objective political analyst, what's your reaction? This kind of statement?
As a political scientist, I can't help but say she's wrong to make the case, because scientifically she cannot make the case that the government has failed and failed woefully. And even as a militant of the CPDM, naturally, there's no way that I can agree with that, because that statement is against the facts. And besides, in a republic, and particularly a republic that is a democracy such as ours, to prove and to determine how wrong or how right a government that is elected, a government of a republic that is elected is, the only method by which you prove that, and I'm sure that I expect our sister and the president of the CPP party, Madam Kawala, to know this, the only method that's democratically recognized and accepted is the method of election. And as you know, the present government headed by President Biya has undergone a multi-party election. How many times? I think two, since the 1990s. 92, 2004, 2011, and now we're about to do it again, 2018. In these elections, which were democratic elections, in the elections which Madam Kawala's CPP, at first she was in the SDF, as you know, and as a member of the SDF party, she took part in that election, but also as the leader of the CPP party, she has taken part as a candidate, by the way, I think once or more than once. But in all honesty, she failed. But the government, President Biya, was elected and re-elected.
Even though the results were contested?
No. The results being contested do not make the results illegal or do not make the results fake, because they were contested, and by law, the Cameroonian law, the results were proclaimed, and they stand. As a matter of law, they stand. The president of the CPP has the right to say what she's saying, but I cannot help but say that she is wrong scientifically, and she's wrong politically, because there is no fact in what she's saying, but she has the right to criticize, which is her place, by the way, as a member of the opposition. So, but the tendency is that the fact that somebody criticizes does not make the person right in what they are saying.
But she and other critics back such statements by explaining or looking at the what is qualified today as the limping economic state of Cameroon, as the limping socio-political climate, the instability in the country, and so on.
Yeah, that's the way we understand. I mean, Cameroonian economy is not an economy in chaos. Neither is it an economy which is failing, because we have partners, the European Union, the IMF, the World Bank. They are all working with us. The Cameroonian economy is one of the economies in the world that is growing. It's growing at about, I think, 4 to 5%. I'm not an economist, and I try not to dwell much on it, but from what I read, the Cameroonian economy is one of the economies that is growing. It is the leading economy in the CEMAC sub-region. So while it has its problems, as all economies do, all economies have problems. And the fact that economies have problems does not necessarily mean that they are failing. The Cameroonian economy is not a failing economy. And I think the first thing we should do, and we should always do this, is to show that first as patriots and as nationalists, because we have to be proud of our Cameroonianness, in spite of whatever problems we may be facing, we should not try to condemn ourselves or behave as if we are people with a complex. It doesn't mean that we don't have our problems, politically, economically, socially. We do. But we are trying to solve those problems as all nation states should do and are supposed to do.
Coming back to the socio-political unrest that is being used by opposition politicians and critics, members of the civil society, and even international non-governmental organizations to as indicators that the current regime has somehow failed in its duties. If you were to be asked today to evaluate government's management of the socio-political unrest in the northwest and southwest regions today, what will you say?
First, those NGOs that you mentioned, they are civil society organizations. They don't hold a monopoly of the truth, that's the first of all. And secondly, the fact that they've said what they are saying does not make right what they say, because there are other experts. Don't forget that in Cameroon, Cameroon is a country with lots of expertise in many domains. So what these NGOs, and it's not all NGOs who say so, we know the NGOs that you're referring to, are saying does not make right what they are saying. And therefore, they have a right to say what they are saying, and no one can deny them their right to say so. But I think that's scientifically wrong.
Amnesty International, Crisis Group, these are credible international non-governmental organizations.
I know Amnesty very well, I know International Crisis Group very well, but there are thousands of international NGOs in the world. Amnesty International and the International Crisis Group are just among these two or so, among the thousands of international NGOs that are around. But the fact that they say what they say, as I've said, it's their right to say those things. But as Cameroonians, who is an expert at least in something, I'm sure that the International Crisis Group knows. I'm sure that Amnesty International knows that other experts may not necessarily agree with them.
You certainly remember, Prof, that International Crisis Group warned at a certain time in one of its reports that the secessionists were ready to take up arms before the new twist that we are experiencing now with attacks on security forces and so on, who are being killed and so on. Yeah. The International Crisis Group had issued a warning telling government to do something fast before arms come into play.
See, in 58 years, successive governments in Cameroon have been doing something about our living together as a united nation that was reunified 57 years ago. It is not International Crisis Group that has to tell us that. My expertise and other experts around could have told the International Crisis Group that, and even Amnesty International. We who have been in government and who support the regime, this is a daily job for us. So it is not the International Crisis Group to use its expertise through its report to tell the government what to do or what it ought to do. The government has an agenda. The government of Cameroon knows the problems of Cameroon and has a mastery of the problems of Cameroon more than the International Crisis Group could tell them. I believe the first thing, and in all honesty, is that the government has, through the declarations of the head of state, acknowledged, and which is a good thing. The beginning of the solution of every problem is to acknowledge that something is taking place. The government has acknowledged.
Even though it was rejected at the beginning.
Well, let us say that.
The government member said there was no Anglophone.
Some may have said so. You know, the government is a collective entity, it's a composite, and it's very normal. But there is a head. The head of state himself has come out and declared that he's understood and he has seen that there is some pertinence in the problems that have been raised, and that is willing to go to any length and every length to find a solution, and the government is embarked on that agenda. First, acknowledgement. The question you've asked is, what has it then done having acknowledged it? The first thing the government has done, as you know, is to give priority to the fact that let us be open to each other in an honest manner. Let's try to dialogue. And the dialogue, a lot of people, as you know, dialogue is not an act, it's not an event. Dialogue is a process, and it's a time-bound process. This dialogue began with the lawyers and the teachers. This dialogue has continued maybe in a very unstructured manner, people talking to each other, elites going down to villages to talk, political parties talking, civil society talking, the government using different emissaries to talk. This talking has continued. Now perhaps there is another stage that the dialogue has to go, which is make it more structured. Perhaps this is where we're leading to. But the government has shown, and the head of state has shown, even during his last end of year speech, he still said he believes in dialogue and he wants dialogue. And I think everybody wishes that we have that dialogue as long as we are frank with each other. Instead of us spending time to cut each other down, blame each other, and use diatribes or some sort of propaganda. It's not necessary. We're all Cameroonians. We should not be violent. We should not destroy each other. We should not destroy the public. Let's find common ground. I believe in these people. I admire the Munas and Fonchas and the Ndelis and the Mbiles. I still admire the Fonangwafos and the Moketas. Let us work in their wisdom, in the legacy that these people want us to have. Let us use that as a golden egg and make Cameroon a better place, rather than destroy it and destroy each other. What the extremists are doing, meaning the secessionists, is totally not only abhorrent, but it goes against the wisdom of the Fonchas, the Munas. Because each time I read about what our secessionists are doing, it's a form of extremism that is like, it takes the form of the likes of the Boko Harams, or the Islamic State. We don't need to go that far, because the Fonchas, the Munas, the Ndelis, the Mbiles, and today we still have the Moketas and the Fonangwafos around. They don't want us to do that. They want us to talk to each other.
And many believe that it would not have reached there if government had handled this crisis properly, when it just started with a peaceful protest by teachers and lawyers, and later turned violence. They turned violent, notably with violent repression coming from elements of the National Armed Forces. And later we had the massive protest that we had in September and in October. And now the new twist with civilians dying as well as soldiers, elements of the National Gendarmerie, the police, and the military who are dying.
That's why I say it's unfortunate.
And these are indicators of poor management.
No, it's not an indicator of poor management. Let us use psychology. Sometimes, in all honesty, we should be frank with ourselves. And you know, the Commonwealth told us that we should be frank. Everybody tells us that we should be honest with each other, we should be frank. Because we don't have a reason. I have no reason to suspect you or to think that just because you ask me a question, I should get angry. No. The first thing we should say is that patriotism and nationalism do not permit us to give ourselves any reason to justify violence. Because violence is not part of Cameroonian culture. Violence is not a value system that was bequeathed to us by the founding fathers. To turn on each other, to kill ourselves, is un-Cameroonian. It's against the values of our republic. Nothing justifies terrorism, violence, destruction. Nothing. Nothing on this earth should make us turn against each other. That should be the basis or the premise for moving forward without violence. In other words, that's a premise for rejecting extremism. Now you use the case that it is because of the poor handling by the government. I think that all governments, especially democratic governments such as the one we've got, especially Republican governments such as the one we've got, they take their time to understand, to study, and methodically to be able to use certain policies that have been initiated in order to solve certain problems. If you look at, you've used the case of the security measures that have been taken. As you know, because I'm not teaching you this, in all nation states, by virtue of the sovereignty of a nation state, governments have as a primary mission and regalian duty, first, to protect its citizens, to protect property, and to protect the territorial integrity. That is the regalian mission of all governments. Whenever a security problem is raised, whether you are in France, or in America, or in Britain, or in Cameroon, or in Nigeria, the government will always react to make sure that in response to a security problem, there must be security measures. Security measures are not intended to undo the republic or to undo the lives of people. The contrary is that they are there to protect the lives of people, to protect property, to protect the territorial integrity of the nation state and so forth. That is what we are doing.
But we observed, Prof, during the massive demonstrations in Bamenda and other parts of the northwest and the southwest regions that many persons died after they received live bullets.
Yes, yes. We've all read these reports. And I'm sure that the government is carrying out its investigations. Others are carrying out investigations also. And, you know, whenever you have social movements, the tendency so that there are exceptions or cases where there are excesses. That we don't deny that. No one can deny that there were some losses of life, which was unfortunate.
Right. Some political actors, notably like the national president of the Social Democratic Front, John Fundi, they have condemned what they call the application of military solution to a political problem, notably talking about the continuous heavy militarization of the two Anglophone regions of the country. Is that the right way to go about finding solutions to these?
No, I think we should first of all say that Chairman Mr. John Fundi, I mean, I know him and I know that he's a man of integrity. We respect him for the role that he's playing as a political leader. There's no doubt about that. But that reading, that interpretation of the government's reaction in terms of military measures, I think it's a little bit more partisan than factual, because the putting in place of security measures is not meant to be the political solution to the political problem. The putting in place of the security measures is a security response to a security problem that has been raised. The killing of civilians by men and women who are apparently secessionists, and the killing of our men and women in uniform who are doing nothing but preserve the republic in security of the republic. This is what they do. So that reading, that measure is a security measure. Now, is it the political solution? No. The security measure does not preclude the political solution. The political solution is bigger than the security solution. And does the security measure, is it warranted? Is it necessary? Is it appropriate? Yes, because as I've said, in all sovereign governments, when a security problem is raised, there's always a security solution or measure that is taken. But that security solution is not the political solution and does not preclude the political solution.
Some have said President Paul Biya on the 31st of December declared war on his people.
No, he didn't. That's a wrong reading. That's a partisan reading.
And as an expert in this matter, was it right for the President of the Republic to announce in such hard words the continuous implementation of security measures in the two Anglophone regions, which have been qualified today as a declaration of war?
No, first is wrong. As I said, it's a partisan reading. First, the President's security measures are not a declaration of war against the Anglophones. No. First of all, he didn't even use those words that he has declared war. No. They are a security measure. The President's security measures are a security measure put in place, and which is a type put in place, it doesn't matter what government there is, to ensure that those who are working against the integrity of the country, of the nation state, will of course be called to book. And if you recall, the President said in his end of year speech that they will be tried in courts, to tell you that the President believes in Republican legality, and that is a Democrat and is a Republican leader. He said that he will not accept excesses, but he will make sure that those who are caught will be called to book and will be tried in normal courts of law under our laws. So it tells you that this is not a war against the people. Rather, it is meant to protect the people and not to be against the people. So it's not a declaration of war against the people. And those who make that reading, that it is a declaration of war, I think they are being more partisan than really being political or being factual. It's not factual. Secondly, those security measures are necessary because any time that a nation state is faced with insecurity of whatever kind, especially when that insecurity is violence, is destruction, is the killing of men and women in uniform and civilians, the only person who has the legitimate, legal, constitutional right to react and to do something about it is a sovereign government, the government of the people. No other person can do it. And when it does it in the name of the people, on behalf of the people, and for the production of the people, and not against the people. For you to say, therefore, that it's a declaration of war against the people, I think that's partisan reading, and I think it's not factual, and I think it's wrong. In spite of the fact that these political leaders say so, but I think that they are wrong in that because, and this is the political scientist who is speaking now, this is not a militant speaking, this is wrong, it's not factual, because anyone who knows, whether you are in France, or whether you are in America, or whether you are in Nigeria, or in Ghana, or whatever, this is exactly what you'll see. The history of the world is open to everyone. You tell me where there has been an exception. Give me a country where this was not done.
All right, Prof.
There's none.
All right, Prof.